What if the people you trusted most, the ones who sat next to you in class, laughed with you at lunch, shared every secret, and texted you every night, were the ones quietly planning to end your life? Not strangers, not enemies you could see coming. Your best friends. On a quiet summer night in July 2012, 16-year-old Skylar Neese climbed out of her bedroom window in Star City, West Virginia. Surveillance cameras at the apartment complex captured her just after midnight, stepping carefully through the open window and getting into the back seat of a light-colored sedan. She believed she was heading out for a late-night drive and some time with the two girls she considered her closest friends in the world, Sheila Eddy and Rachel Schoaf. She never came home. Before we continue, if you're already pulled into this story the way so many people are, take 1 second right now to hit the like button and subscribe. It helps more people find these cases, and it lets me keep making them. Now let's go back. Skylar. Annette Neese was the only child of Dave and Mary Neese. She was born in 1996 and grew up in a close, ordinary family that loved her deeply. She was an honors student at University High School in Morgantown, the kind of teenager who took her classes seriously and already thought about a future that might include becoming a criminal lawyer. She worked evening shifts at Wendy's to earn her own money. Friends and teachers described her as loyal, sharp, quick to listen, and someone who genuinely cared about the people around her. She had routines. She had plans. She had a family that checked on her, shared everyday moments, and trusted that the ordinary patterns of teenage life would hold. For years, Sheila and Rachel had been central to that life. The three girls spent hours together after school, shared rides, hung out on weekends, posted photos of themselves side by side, and presented the image of an unbreakable trio. To outsiders, and even to Skylar's own parents at times, they looked inseparable. Skylar trusted them with the kind of openness that only comes when you believe the people closest to you will protect that trust. But something had begun to shift in the months before that July night. Social media posts from Skylar in the days leading up to her disappearance hinted at growing frustration and a sense of being left out. She wrote about feeling sick of being at home, about friends who were no longer acting like friends, about trust that was eroding. The tone in some of those messages carried an edge of isolation. The quiet realization that the circle she once relied on was tightening without her. Still, when the invitation came to sneak out that night, she went. She trusted them enough to climb through her window and get into that car. Her parents had said goodnight earlier in the evening after she returned from her shift at Wendy's. They believed she was settling in for the night. The next morning, Dave Neese came home for lunch and called out for his daughter the way he always did. There was no answer. He eventually went into her room and found a made-up bed that had not been slept in, an open window with a stool outside, and no sign of Skylar. At first, the family hoped she had simply stayed over at a friend's house or gone out without telling them. When she failed to show up for her scheduled shift at work that afternoon, the hope faded into fear. They reported her missing. The search began almost immediately. Flyers went up across Morgantown and the surrounding areas. Neighbours, classmates, teachers, and volunteers joined the effort. Tips poured in from people who thought they might have seen her. Local media covered the disappearance. The community came together the way small towns often do when one of their own vanishes. And through it all, Sheila and Rachel remained visible and present. They helped hand out flyers. They spoke with investigators. They stood alongside Skylar's parents in moments of public worry. Online, they posted messages of concern, affection, and hope that Skylar would come home safely. They presented themselves as the devastated best friends any community would expect to see. To many people watching at the time, their concern looked completely genuine. Months passed with no resolution. Skylar's body had not been found. The case stayed open and active. Investigators kept examining the timeline and the last known movements. One of the early statements from the two girls claimed they had dropped Skylar off near her home well before the time the surveillance footage showed her entering the car. That discrepancy mattered. It did not match the camera evidence. Polygraph examinations raised further questions. The investigation continued to circle back to the last people known to have seen her alive. Federal agents became involved. The search widened. The community kept looking, refusing to give up hope even as the weeks turned into months. If you're still with me this far into the story, it means this case is hitting the same way it hit so many people. Take a quick second right now to hit the like button and subscribe. If you haven't already, it genuinely helps more people find these stories, and it lets me keep making them. In early January 2013, after a period of intense personal distress that led to hospitalization, Rachel Schoaf asked to speak with authorities. She confessed. She told investigators that she and Sheila had planned the outing with Skylar. They had driven her across the state line into a remote wooded area in Pennsylvania under the pretense of hanging out the way they had done before. What followed ended Skylar's life. Rachel later guided police to the location. In the middle of January 2013, Skylar's remains were recovered from that wooded area. The confession stunned the community that had spent half a year searching and hoping. These were not outsiders or distant acquaintances. These were the girls Skylar had called friends, the ones who had sat in the same classrooms, shared the same social circles, and publicly mourned her absence while knowing exactly what had happened. Motive never settled into a single clear explanation that satisfied everyone who heard the case. Some accounts pointed to rising resentment and a desire to remove Skylar from their lives completely. Others referenced private tensions between Sheila and Rachel, and the fear that certain secrets might surface if the friendship with Skylar continued. What remained consistent across every version was the calculated nature of the betrayal, the law that used their history together, the trust Skylar placed in them when she climbed out that window, and the public performance of friendship and grief that continued long after she was gone. Rachel Schoaf pleaded guilty to second-degree murder. She received a sentence of 30 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 10 years. Sheila Reddy, after initially denying any role, later pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Both remain incarcerated. In court, Rachel expressed remorse directly to Skylar's parents. Sheila's statements left a different impression on those who heard them. The legal process brought a measure of accountability, but it could never restore what had been taken. The case drew intense and lasting public attention far beyond West Virginia. The contrast between the affectionate social media posts, the help with the search, the public displays of concern, and the private planning created a deep sense of unease that still surfaces whenever the story is retold. People struggled and continue to struggle with the idea that someone so close could hide such intent while continuing to act the part of a grieving friend. The story spread through true crime coverage, documentaries, podcasts, and ongoing conversation because it forced a difficult and uncomfortable question. How well do we ever really know the people we call friends? How much of the image we see is real and how much is performance? In the years that followed, Skylar's parents channeled their grief into action. Their advocacy helped led to the passage of Skylar's law in West Virginia. The legislation required authorities to issue Amber Alerts more quickly and under clearer conditions when a child is reported missing. It was one concrete way to try to turn an irreversible loss into something that might protect other families facing the same sudden and terrifying absence. Dave and Mary Neese have continued to speak about their daughter, about the life she should have had, and about the betrayal that ended it. Skylar Neese was 16 years old. She had plans, a job, good grades, a future she was working toward, and a family that loved her without reservation. On the night she climbed out of that window, she believed she was simply spending time with the two people she trusted most in her everyday world. The people who should have protected that friendship instead ended it. The social media messages that followed, full of pretended concern and affection for a girl they already knew was gone, only deepened the sense of betrayal once the truth finally emerged. The ordinary details of her last night now read differently. The late-night invitation, the climb through the window, the car waiting outside, the trust that made all of it possible. None of those details felt dangerous at the time. That is what makes the story so hard to set aside. It challenges a basic assumption many of us carry without thinking about it, that friendship, especially the kind that looks close and constant and is reinforced every day, online and in person, is safe. It was not safe for Skylar. More than a decade later, the case still unsettles people for the same reason it did when the truth first came out. It is not only a story about a missing teenager or a solved crime. It is a story about the gap between what people show the world and what they are capable of doing to someone who trusts them completely. Skylar's life was cut short by the two people she had every reason to believe would never harm her. That fact continues to linger long after the legal sentences were handed down. If this story stayed with you the way it stays with so many others who have heard it, take a second right now to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Drop a comment if you've followed this case before or if it is new to you. Your support genuinely helps. These stories keep being told.